tank and basically of our main presenter and guest speaker for today. So, hello everyone, I am Erila, part of GIMI team. I am really glad to have a new speaker for today. Let's make an introduction. What is GIMI Think Tank? Basically, GIMI Think Tank is a weekly activity that GIMI is running since 2020. Basically, this meeting gathers people and innovators from all around the world. Most of them are GIMI ambassadors, GIMI partners, basically, and innovator experts, part of our GIMI, IXL, and other partners network. So usually we use this as a forum to discuss with each other what is going in each country around innovation, what are the new stuff, and innovative products, and basically what our partners are doing to advance innovation in their country, in particular with the help of GIMI approach and GIMI framework. So we usually, beside doing that, we usually have a guest speaker who is talking either for a trend or for the state of innovation in his own country, or for an innovative product or theory. So we usually do a combination of professors, researchers, practitioners, business people, basically, but everything, like the common theme for all of us is innovation. And they usually either talk about something happening in their country or a particular topic related to innovation. So I'm really glad for today to introduce Roberto Melo. Roberto Melo is an expert in the enterprise innovation sector using information technology. He's a serial entrepreneur and started businesses in the US and Latin America. He started his career as a system designer and game developer for Apple platforms. He has worked at Intel Co. He has worked at National Center for Supercomputing Applications. And basically he has founded Grupo de Chain, acting as the visionary of multiple solutions of high impact for the public and private sector. Roberto is a strategist and executive leader, and now he's leading Escala Latam. Escala Latam is a platform which provides to SMEs an automated brokerage with a regional innovation ecosystem to drive scalable growth. Basically, they identify and create value in early and late stage SMEs by implementing the latest business model and techniques, digital transformation trends, connecting them with world-class mentors and open innovation. So I'd like to leave the floor to Roberto. Roberto, it's a pleasure to have you here from Panama. Please introduce more yourself if I missed anything, and Escala Latam, and you can go ahead with the presentation. Usually the presentation is 20 minutes, and then we have Q&A session. Please feel free to interact, all the participants in the audience. You can write in the chat, or you can wait until the presentation is finished to discuss and ask questions. I hope everybody will be interactive as usual. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rila. It's, first of all, it's a pleasure for me to collaborate with you today, and greetings from Panama. And thanks, Rila, for the invitation. It's I certainly look forward to continue to collaborate with GIMI and all the initiatives that you guys are doing worldwide. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about Panama and the inspiration also for a project here in Panama and Latin America. It's called Scala Latam. And in essence, not only do I want to share with you sort of the vision of the region and the vision for our project, but also I want to take the opportunity for you to share with me your thoughts on the direction and ideas that we're actually implementing in this project to see if we can enhance it. So I hope that we can make this a little bit interactive. So so hang on, let me just start my presentation here, and then. So great. I want to tell you first about Escala Latam. I am a serial entrepreneur. As Rila said, I have been in this software technology business for a while. I sold my company to a company in Singapore a few years back. And at that time, when I sold my company, I after many interactions of other startups that I've been involved with, me and a couple of other prominent entrepreneurs in Panama decided that there is a huge gap and a lot of learning that we could save other entrepreneurs in the future. So we set up to start Escala Latam as a platform to help create a scalable, innovative, entrepreneurial opportunities and to scale them throughout the process. So, and then we partnered up with a Babson College in Boston and a professor there called Dan Eisenberg, who's sort of an expert on entrepreneurial ecosystems. And we started our program here in Panama. Creating our first program was called the Scalarator. So it's actually based on scaling traditional businesses that are looking to expand their opportunities beyond just a regional fair. So, but then after that, COVID came, and I also want to give you the thought of here in Panama we say ACDC is after antes de COVID, después de COVID. So COVID has changed everything. It changed, everything that we used to do differently. It actually changed the context. So one thing that we are, before for us to get together on something, on a meeting like this, or to do it presentially, it will be very difficult. But the question here is, how does COVID affected entrepreneurial ecosystems? Did it make a difference? That's a question that we're asking ourselves. Is it having an impact on the entrepreneurial ecosystem growth? So looking at the traditional model of a regional ecosystem, and this is Dan Eisenberg's model, by the way, just explain the ecosystems where you have pillars like markets, public policy, finance, culture, support, and human capital. But then, here in Latin America, we have lots of small countries. If each country typically has its own ecosystem and is highly disconnected. So we none of these ecosystems interact with one another, and they're very closed. So one of the promises that we're actually looking to do with Scala Latam is how this COVID affect this ecosystem, and if there's an opportunity for us to interconnect these ecosystems at a certain level. So I will talk to you more about that. So if we look at all of Latin America, it's very fragmented. Now we have Panama, Colombia, Costa Rica, and if you look at Central America only, Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, even though there's three countries that we technically should collaborate in a single region, the reality is we're like totally separate ecosystems. So I also want to give you a little bit of context of what's the situation on the entrepreneurial aspect of these countries. This is recent information from CMD Innovation Labs. And essentially, you can see in the diagram that a lot of the more mature entrepreneurial ecosystems in America, like the US and Canada, essentially have a very depth of market and lots of investments. While we see all this region in Latin America sort of left behind here for many reasons, they have lacks a little bit of traction. And then also the other thing that I wanted to cover from this particular report is a little bit on the level of investments. And when we're actually looking at how much investment is actually being received by entrepreneurial companies in these countries like Panama and Costa Rica, we see that there is some activity maybe at the seed at pre-series A, but the amount and the size of the investment is small. So there's a huge gap in the curve. So many of these countries don't or are not receiving necessarily high level post-round investments in fostering companies that are growing. So I think what we concluded out of maybe data like this is that there's a huge gap in the financing needs of companies to grow in Latin America. So, and then also a huge gap in maybe the size of the investments. If you see, for instance, in Panama, most companies that have received investment are what is considered a pre-series A, but for a pre-series A, it's rather small, less than 100,000. And maybe of the Central American countries, Costa Rica has sort of the biggest impact at 750,000 for what they're perceiving as a Series A. So generally, there's a huge cap for investments into these opportunities. But then at the same time, I want to share other recent data of Latin American investment in venture dollars. That we've seen a huge turnaround in this in the last year, just 2021 mark a huge difference in Latin America as far as investments in the region. As you can see, we essentially more than tripled the amount of investments that are received from companies in the region right now. So it's quite exciting because there's a lot of opportunity in the region, and it's a hugely untapped market as far as new opportunities to invest in. Um, the other up the other thing though, however, is if you see this part here in blue, a lot of the deals that are happening right now are more late stage. So there's, even though the mid stage or seed stage, which is the early stage, which is the green part here, has grown, there's probably more need to develop that part so you can get more deals funded. And then also here's the trend on the number of deals funded. So it's a huge increase, so maybe or significant increase yearly on the number of deals that are actually being funded in Latin America. So I wanted to give you a context of where we stand today as far as the opportunity. Latin American is hot, at least in the last year, in number of investments. And there's a huge opportunity on that market of many companies that have not received funding, but there's a lot of innovation talent, capabilities, and resources. And then maybe we have a lot of ecosystems that are disconnected. So a lot of this was the inspiration in our project, Scala Latam, which is how can we connect these ecosystems? And in addition to connecting those ecosystems, how can we get them to collaborate? So I also want to cover from the traditional. This is looking at the Panama ecosystem from the traditional Dan Eisenberg entrepreneurial ecosystem model. So all these ecosystems. This is Panama in particular. I could maybe later on realize share with you the entire Latin American report, which was done by Innovation CMD Innovation Labs. But in essence, a lot of these countries like Panama, we have a growing ecosystem, but one of the areas that will have the most impact is what we're calling large corporations. So we typically have the public sector and large corporations and institutions and working with the startups and funding. So one of the areas where we see a lot of opportunities, what's the role of large corporations driving demand for the startups, driving innovation demand, meaning can these large corporations in the region identify needs in the region so that the innovators could work on those needs, on those problems. But that's an example of Panama. And then maybe in this same report, by the way, we see the deficiencies. So right now, this report ranks from 1 to 100% the opportunities of markets, politics, human capital. And if you see Panama, our highest ranking positions here are at 50%. So we see a huge need to develop the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but we also see a huge opportunity to collaborate with other ecosystems in the region to do this more rapidly. So the question here is, Latin America is hot as regards to generating innovative, scalable entrepreneurial activity, but can we do it rapidly? And maybe historically, if you look at Silicon Valley, for instance, and other ecosystems, Silicon Valley perhaps took 70 years to develop, and Israel maybe took, let's say 30, and then perhaps others like Singapore probably took a lot less, like 15 or 10. So the question is, can the region of Latin America learn from experiences on other regions and do this more rapidly? Let's say in 5 years, can we do and generate a scalable innovation world, learning from what has been done elsewhere and do this in 5 years? But we have lots of work to do. But could we do it quickly by learning from others? So in order to do that, we need to, a lot of the ecosystems are like things like, from the government perspective, vision and diversity, budget, or are very much, let's say, government driven or public policy driven. So a lot of the initiatives in Latin America, we sit down and say, okay, what can the government do for us? As we sort of wait for the government to do something so that entrepreneurial activity happens. But here at Scala Latam, we're saying, hey, look, the government has been trying to do this for the last 10 years. Can they really do it? And other ecosystems did not wait for the government to do this. So if you look at Silicon Valley and so forth, innovation isn't driven by waiting for the government. So we're thinking is, can we actually look at the demand side, which is the private sector? Who generates the demand? Large corporations. Can we work with large corporations to actually deliver innovative growth more rapidly rather than waiting for the government? So we took on a private initiative with Scala Latam to do this directly from the private sector. And of course, we will collaborate with government and we will collaborate with multilateral organizations, but we're taking sort of a private sector approach to generating this innovative growth. So from the perspective of what's Scala, so the first thing is Latin America is built of many small companies. 60% of its economy is actually driven by SMBs. So the question is, could we actually build methodologies to help SMBs grow more rapidly? Can we give them structure and standardization? And can we induce innovation so that we can make some of these companies grow more rapidly? But a lot of the economy is driven by small and mid-sized companies. And then the other thing that I had mentioned is that the ecosystem is disconnected. Costa Rica is not working with Salvador, which is not working with Peru, or is not working with Ecuador. We each individually have different efforts. Is there a way for us to connect certain pillars of this ecosystem so that we can act as a single region? And then the next thing is funding. Can we actually use the financial structure of, say, Panama, so which is a dollar-based economy with a very strong financial sector? Could we actually organize funds so that we could actually invest in these companies and help them grow? One of the regions is one of the biggest shortcomings of the ecosystem is lack of liquidity. We saw it, most of the deals ended up in maybe a Series A or pre-Series A, but there was no continuity. But at the same time, there's a lot of interest. So anyway, with that observation of what's happening in the ecosystem, we came up with Scala Latam. So Scala Latam is sort of a reduced structure of interconnecting ecosystems. We want to interconnect ecosystems in Latin America in three pillars. We want to connect markets, we want to connect talent, we want to connect finances. And the rest of the activities of the ecosystems, like public policy and so forth, we can influence, but at the same time, we can interconnect the other ones to incent faster growth from the private sector. So essentially, what Scala is developing is that we're developing programs to foster corporate innovation and to generate demand. And at the same time, we're mapping out startups at different stages and creating programs for these startups to standardize their processes, to generate innovation. And then finally, we're creating a fund in Panama so that we could essentially crowd fund from different angels money into a structure or into a private fund or entity in Panama that will invest or be in a position to invest in the best opportunities or co-invest with other players in the region. So in essence, what we are looking to do is to create this pipeline of opportunities that essentially through articulation of the ecosystem with events, programs, and so forth, it filters down opportunities in different stages. We map them until they're ready to receive investment, and then we actually continue to support them. And then, as I said, we are looking also to not only do this in Panama, because Panama is a small country. So the general population in Panama, so you get an idea, is 5 million. So we have, even though we have a good, strong financial market, we act more of as a hub, as a hub for the region with financial capability. But then we're thinking of the traditional ecosystem. We interconnect this ecosystem in these three pillars of market, finance, and human capital, and then take advantage of the huge talent of maybe a set of these countries initially. We're looking at Panama, Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador, and El Salvador as our pilot program. Could we interconnect the resources and the ecosystems to generate entrepreneurial work, entrepreneurial activity in this region, initially with this set of countries? So a little bit about how we do that. I want to cover a bit on what we're calling our corporate innovation launch. But I said one of the initiatives is to find large corporations in these countries that generate demand. So we interconnect large corporations like Copa Airlines, like banks, like insurance companies, and we ask them, what do you need to do innovation internally? And out of that innovation that you're doing internally, how could you do that openly with some of the ecosystem that we have of entrepreneurial small SMBs to interconnect them and generate traction. Um, so we have created also here in Panama, we're calling a corporate innovation club, which is grouping these companies in clusters that regularly meet to look at opportunities, tendencies, um, and interconnect with other ecosystems so they can learn. And then we explore, um, let's say, tracks in areas of knowledge, connection, and ecosystem development. So, for instance, on the knowledge side, we will do like programs for their staff to review their culture and to interconnect them. On the connection side, we do innovation challenges that will ask the corporates to give us a challenge where they need innovation, and then we get the startups to develop solutions for that. We did a program like this last year, and we 20 corporations participated. We generated around 80 challenges, and we had 182 companies participate, delivering us about 400 solutions. Out of those, we actually funded with money invested on a seed stage. We funded around 20 companies out of that group. And then finally, well, the last aspect is the ecosystem. We do events. Like recently, we did the Iberoamerica Invest Network, which is we got together like all the VCs of the region. We had around 20 VCs and angels, and then we did a series of pitches of different companies that were a later stage. Um, so anyway, our promise here is, can the corporates do open innovation? So can we use open innovation in these corporations, and an open innovation that will allow the corporates to actually work with the SMBs? And in essence, what we're looking to see is generally corporates have a very rigid, very, let's say, traditional and not necessarily innovative way of growing new products. But what we're actually looking to do is to bring diversity of the innovative groups and the SMBs into these companies so they could be more rapid in generating that innovation. So on the other side, also what we're doing is not necessarily from the corporate, but from the startup side, is we have developed what we're calling an escalameter, which is at what stage it's your organization related to being able to get funding and also being able to scale. So we have developed a system that has 4 quadrants of maturity, and it has 8 stages of the company. So based on certain diagnostic of the company, we will take a picture of where you stand today, and with that picture, we have different programs. So we'll help them move to the next level. Whether it's funding, or whether it's developing an MVP, or whether it's getting a next client, or whether it's you already have a number of clients, how will we take this to several markets in Latin America? So how will we scale, but in a structured way of doing that? And then finally, we also articulate the ecosystem with, let's say, governments, multilateral organizations like IDB, for instance, universities, of course, the private sector, and then the startups. And then just to finish up, our vision here is not only, as you see, not only to create the programs for the corporates, for the ecosystem and so forth, but we're also registered here in the Panama Stock Exchange. We're registering an instrument which is going to allow us to create what we're calling a multi-series special purpose entity. That the multi-series special purpose entity is going to allow us to raise money from private angel investors in a public instrument, meaning they will receive a publicly traded stock. And then it will allow us to create what we're calling micro funds, essentially funds that have a particular thesis of investment. And then also it will allow us to do micro offerings. It will be like small offerings of some of the startups that are a later stage. And the idea of doing this last part is for us to be able to inject liquidity, which is one of the largest problems in the ecosystem. How can we organize investments on this? And so in essence, this is a little bit of what we're doing at a very high level. So I would like to stop here and maybe share with you, or for you to share with us your impressions to this. Yeah, we're on the right track. What do you think of Panama, or if you want to know more about the region? So more at this point, I would like to open it up to sort of your discussions or ideas. But this is a very, very high level introduction to what we're doing here in Latin America, and particularly on our project in Scala Latam.
Great. Thank you very much, Roberto. Please, if you can stop sharing the screen so we can see each other. I am opening the Q&A session, so everyone who wants to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand and feel free to speak up. I would like, in fact, someone from Colombia, might be Alice, to share more what IXL Center did in Colombia, because it's very much in line how we build the ecosystem there, working together with the government, with SMEs, with chambers of commerce, and might be a great example and best practice to replicate that in Panama as well. So I don't want to put someone in the spotlight, but I like someone from Colombia. I think Alice is the right fit to do that, but also Edwin to share more about that and ask as well any questions.
Yes, so thank you very much for the presentation, and it is nice to see all the things that you're moving in Panama and in Colombia. We did also a very big program, but it was with the government, and IXL Center was one of the companies that joined all the process, encouraging companies to strengthen innovation capabilities. So we spread all the program through the country. And, it was like a sharing risk with the government program. And as a result of that, many of the companies start to understand and to speak the same language around innovation. So that was a huge gap at first, and I can imagine that you also have this gap in Panama in terms of the language, because to start, many years ago, the innovation was related only with design thinking and generating ideas, and everyone is happy about the ideas, but not creating and capture the value. So creating and capture the value has to deal with, to build innovation system, to build a way to do things, a systematic way to do things. And I think it will be really nice if you can know this program in deep. And we can share experiences, because all what you have built in Panama, it's amazing also to connect, because at the end there are many things that happen because of that connection. So yeah.
Yeah, Alex, it will be interesting for us to, one of the premises that we think is valuable when I said interconnecting ecosystems and like say human capital, for instance, it's knowledge, huh? Knowledge. So for instance, this knowledge that you have in Colombia, you did a program in Colombia, but can we actually connect that knowledge so it could be used as a connected ecosystem? So absolutely, we will very glad be to connect and exchange some of the ideas. So let's keep the communication forward. But we think that there are many programs like yours where we could actually bring the knowledge and we actually reuse that to use it as a context for other ecosystems. And then at the end also to have a pool of startups that we have captured value, but we're moving forward. So some of these startups, they want to look forward as to maybe serving the region. So when we discover the startup, not only do we discover and gave them the tools, but could we help them actually capture, regional presence. So it will be fabulous to work. But certainly Colombia, it's when a big actor is a market for the ecosystem. So it's a big player. Absolutely. Absolutely. Irila, I also see a few questions in the chat.
But before doing that, since we are talking about Colombia, and I'd like to give the word to Ron, because he has been the main advisor in creating innovation districts in Colombia. And I'd like him to comment and connect the dots what worked there basically? What was the glue? What was the main thing that worked, and why Colombia is ahead in innovation and creating ecosystem? Please, Ron.
Yes, thank you, Arila. And thank you, Roberto. The comment I'd like to make is in Colombia, which if you take Mexico out of Latam, Colombia is probably as large, if not larger, than the rest of Latam. So the difference in Colombia, each state was jealously competing with each other state. And if Colciensis and Aminciensis had not entered the fray, they would still be, and they would not be collaborating. And it would be a terrible ecosystem, I believe. It would be competitive, but it was Colciensis and Aminciensis that really brought the chamber, and the chambers, of course, chambers of commerce were big players, but they were competing with each other, competing for funds, competing for attention. Each city was claiming it was the best city in the country. Each state was saying it was the best state. Each governor was saying it was the best governor. I mean, and it's still somewhat that way, but the advantage they have over Central America is that there at least was one currency, one set of regulations, and one major or two major government ministries or entities that took it upon themselves, Alicia herself, to put it together. And so I think one of the key factors was not so much it was government, it was somebody who could represent the entire region, at least the entire Colombian region, not the entire Andean region, not the entire Latam region, but a region large enough so that small startups could get funding because they had a market that was open to them, that was more than their city, more than Barranquilla, more than their state, more than the state of Atlántico, and at least as large as Colombia. And Colombia had a big kind of foreign investment, foreign trade office too, so they had outreach there. I think your challenge, at least as I've worked in places like Guatemala and Costa Rica and even Mexico, is that startups, particularly, if they are not under the wing or have the sponsorship of major corporations, have no true access, easy access immediately to other markets. They don't have offices in other countries typically as a startup. They may have a partner or two, but the partner or two wants to take their business and steal it and run it in their country. I mean, it's not a great regional ecosystem, and the challenge, therefore, is the smaller companies and startups can't get much money. I think the reason for your low startup is not because there's not a regional infrastructure, it's because there's not a regional market that people feel they can tap. So at least in our experience working with a couple of the larger corporations in Mexico and in Guatemala and in Costa Rica, is that if they can be, as you said in your presentation, Roberto, if they can play the role, somebody has to say, there's no Central American government. I mean, there are a couple of banking institutions that pretend to serve all the countries, but they still serve them as independent states. They don't serve them regionally, truly. So I think I would ask and maybe see what one can do to get the larger, as you said at the beginning, how do you get the larger corporations to take on that role in their self-interest? What's the win-win, as you described your platform at the beginning? We always think, is the platform powerful enough, compelling enough, resilient enough, robust enough to really serve the whole region? And it seems to me finding a way to really get companies who have, in their vested interest, have invested in their own small enterprises, interested in investing in outside enterprises that they might have for right of first refusal on, or right of first refusal for initial seed capital on, or whatever, where they see it in their interest, and where what they provide primarily, in addition to potentially capital and expertise and knowledge, is access to market. And in my experience, that's the biggest barrier to getting significant funding for startups. So I wondered if you could comment on kind of what you are doing with the larger corporations, because you don't have a Colciensis, you don't have an Aminciensis, and I think I would feel it's going to be difficult unless you find a substitute for that kind of entity who can play that role in Central America.
Ron, you're absolutely right. And our observation so far in Scala Latam has existed for 4 years. We have learned a lot about the different interactions that we have worked on. But we believe strongly that corporations are as important aspect or important piece of the equation. And we think that corporations could help generate demand for some of these solutions. Be the first customer, and also not only be the first customer, some of these corporations are also multinationals. They have presence in many of these countries. So we created this concept called the corporate innovation launchpad. So it's actually packaged as an open innovation project for some of these corporations, and we typically talk to the highest level innovative official in the corporation. So today we have in our network corporations like Tigo, Microsoft. We have also Copa Airlines, for instance, and a lot of these, and many retailers and insurance companies like Sura, who's also in Colombia, for instance. And we are finding that the corporations with them we're running open innovation challenges, which is hey, this is what I need, so that we can allow and then we're doing it this bi-directional also. If we have solutions that could be of interest to a particular corporate, we have a particular instance when we match make. And then what has resulted of that is some of the corporations are actually hiring them. They're hiring some of the startups to test the solution or to be a first mover or to have maybe an exclusive period, but essentially it's generating or capturing the innovation. So the other thing that we're doing with Scala as far as generating the market is that we're selecting, we're calling a market driver in each of these countries. So we're selecting a very prominent either an entrepreneur or very prominent organization to join our network as an investor of Scala. And what this is giving us is it's giving us immediate access to that market, but also more importantly for our startups is we're trying to facilitate through Scala the penetration of those markets. So if one of the startups joins a Scala, and then we have 7 countries where we actually are participating, in essence, the startup doesn't need to have 7 offices. They could use our infrastructure to
No, I think that's a good idea.
and it essentially elevates the evaluation of the organization once they join our program. So, but the corporates are absolutely a big piece of our strategy right now. And we generally start identifying the corporates. So we have to have an initial cluster of at least 10 to 15 that are willing to participate in what we're building. So we're having some success on this, but it's a starting point, absolutely.
Just one follow-up quick question about that. So in the US and Europe particularly, but also in certainly larger countries in Latam, there are kind of major innovation centers, innovation parks, incubators that are funded by large companies. So in the US, Verizon has 5 of these innovation labs where small startups can test all of their software developments and everything else on the Verizon backbone or 5G or whatever. And Verizon doesn't charge them anything. Verizon isn't guaranteed right of first refusal in investing them, but they essentially have it because they're looking over their shoulder in the facility, watching them test these things. And so, I think there's more and more companies, particularly those that have a large regional or international footprint, are more and more interested in having these distributed innovation centers, incubation labs, and just creating a magnet for small companies to work together there and have the corporate sponsor be able to see what's going on and hopefully find a way to work with them or give them access to market. Or also what Verizon often does is that it'll be the first customer. It'll be the lead customer for the companies. And I think finding those kinds of companies is hard. It's the Googles, it's the Apples, but it's the regional telecoms throughout the world in India and Africa have often been the sponsors of these because they're so software intensive and technology intensive. Have you done anything like that in Panama?
We are, well, there's different levels to that. The first level is large corporations, which are tech-based, like telecoms and let's say Microsoft, we're negotiating with them so that they provide access to their technology and platforms. So data center capabilities, SaaS case. So it's and then as we're negotiating this, as in the form of a credit. So in the form of a credit for the startups so they can test the solution. So that's just one aspect, but that's more of a technology platform infrastructure. And then the other part is the corporations that pilots. That's a different aspect. So we're doing things like that. This is more related to the open innovation calls that we did last year with IDB, for instance, where the corporations acting as either a test or a pilot for some of the innovative ideas. So we're able to successfully get some of the corporations to accept piloting the solutions, and in some cases hiring the team, providing initial funds. So the sort of a initial hiring for pilot with funding, with some more funding to the startup as well. So we had some of those results in the initiative that we completed last year. And then what we have planned for this year is we're going to do 3 open innovation challenges where the corporations will indicate what they're interested on and sort of the vertical. Typically, like last year, we had interest in fintech, and we had interest in logistic technology, and then we sort of match make the startups that had that with the corporations that were interested, and then we have a process to foster that innovation to the next level. So we think generating demand. What you're saying, Ronald, is the generation of demand is critical for us to strengthen a startup that has an idea, because in many of these countries, lots of startups we find have ideas, but the ideas don't mature into an actual product and an actual customer, and then of course many customers. But generating the demand of a first customer is so critical. So we're trying to build the relationship with the corporates to get them to be willing. And then also the last part of this is corporate venture capital. So we're creating the fund so that the fund could take money from potentially a corporation that wants to do this. So we're offering the alternative of corporate venture capital as a service. So the financial structure that we're building might allow us to take funds from a corporation for the purpose of investing in the opportunities that they are interested on. But a lot of the corporations in Latin America are not ready yet to invest. So this is really new to them. If you look at other ecosystems, like for instance, things like Plug and Play Tech Center in Silicon Valley and so forth, they're experts in doing that, and they do that really well. But the maturing ecosystem like Latam needs more of that to get to the next level. So that's one area that we're certainly looking at with great interest.
If I can make a comment and ask a question as well, which is for Ron and for Alice and for Roberto as well. So basically, we understood several insights in here. We understood that it's key and essential that the government has the vision, right, to create this and to advance innovation in a country. Secondly, is the role of corporates, right, to fund and as well to advance like startups, innovative startups in particular. The third thing that I'm asking is like major actors like GIMI or IXL centers that basically has played a particular role in Colombia, but also in other countries with the certifications, for example. What Alice has tried to do, she didn't mention, but has tried to do and is doing right now, is putting certifications on innovation as a criteria to provide funds, so the government can provide funds to SMEs. So is this something which can be replicated in Panama, can be replicated in other Latam countries? And it's something which would connect, I would say, these countries together, because I saw that one of the challenges that Roberto mentioned is that in order to advance innovation and to see this as a potential region to invest, all the countries somehow need to collaborate together. So is the certification something that might work, and what is the impact of this? I don't know if Ron, Alice, or Roberto would like to comment on that. So
just as a comment or a slight add to that, it seems to me, I'm kind of connecting a couple dots here. So you run a version of what we call the Innovation Olympics for startups and small businesses to address challenges of larger companies. And that's one really good way of doing it. We've done that. Another one that might help you build a stronger kind of regional approach, and it relates to certification, is the way we are now doing the Innovation Olympics. It's with graduate school teams, whether they're engineering and technology programs or MBA programs or whatever. So we get universities from throughout the region to compete to come up with the best solution to a company's challenge. And the company may choose to make those solutions available to others, any ones that they don't take up. But the advantage is heavily building a recruiting capability for bright students in the region so that you don't have as much brain drain, so that people want to stay in Central America to work for startups as opposed to going to the US or China or Europe or wherever. And to attract the best and the brightest to small companies who don't have the ability to have significant recruiting efforts of their own. So I'm wondering if kind of you're aware of that. You may want to talk to Arila, but that GIMI kind of co-sponsors these Innovation Olympics. Everybody involved from like 10 different universities or whatever in Latam gets trained and certified in methodologies. So you're getting people quickly, standard. The companies that participate, their teams get certified. And it's just a great multiplier effect to both get lots of good ideas, get the universities involved who typically compete with each other as well. But now, rather than the universities themselves, it's students from the universities who are competing with student teams. We call them consulting teams, but student teams from other universities. And so you don't have the university bureaucracy, but you do have the best and the brightest kind of entrepreneurial, innovative thinkers in these schools who are mid-career. They tend to be in their early 30s, not in their early 20s. And I think it might be a great way to build a more powerful platform and begin to get more regional collaboration in the kind of startup entrepreneurial tech space.
Interesting. I think we have toyed with the idea of an innovation Olympics. We were even have discussed with a couple of very large media companies like TVs and so forth that are keen to doing this from more of a media perspective. They're an interesting player. So for us to have a discussion, maybe with some of the participants here, on putting together an innovation Olympic project will be interesting because it allows to maybe it could be pulled together with some of the corporations, where the corporations are the ones issuing the challenges. So the innovative teams are not just generating innovation out of the air or thin air, but generating focused innovation on real projects. So certainly, absolutely, your idea, Ronald, on open innovation is right on the money. It will be something that we will certainly need help from GIMI or an organization that has a model for this, because it will save us a lot of time if there's a model. And then I think the other question from Irila on certification, I think a lot of the corporations will be, not only the universities, the corporations might be interested in having certification of their staff, because many of these corporations are looking to become more innovative. But if you look at their staff, it's very thin on knowledge of innovation, even at the highest level. So the certification aspect from the universities, of course, to certify that we have innovators, but from the perspective of the corporations that are wanting to be more innovative, they lack that talent. And so the only way to perhaps elevate the level of some of these corporations, which are more professionals, they're not university level talent. It's more people that are past the university level, and this is essentially they're looking for executive training so we put together sort of an executive training that ties into a certification. I think that will be also very interesting particularly to help our corporate pool. So we're looking to build a very large corporation pool so that we can have a driver set or demand generation set, and that the certification will be important in accomplishing that, I think.
Yeah, just to close the loop here and then go to Bob. Bob has asked a question and a comment, I think. But the idea here is about the certification. One thing is that the companies have the willingness, right, to certify their own people and certify their companies because they have this sort of vision. But the other thing, the way how Alice is trying to do right now in Colombia by embedding this as a criteria in the government in order to fund the companies who have certification, is a sort of forcing the companies, right, to understand more about innovation and deepen their knowledge on innovation. So this is a good way to go as well, in particular in developing countries, which, as you said, knowledge is one of the gaps or one of the pain points beside investment and other challenges as well. Bob, please, if you want to ask the question.
Sure, Roberto. One of the things that the longer term requires is, number one, better access to the internet and the cloud. And number two, the training of youth now in computer coding and STEM, because that's the lifeblood of the technology companies in the future. So I posted on the internet companies I'm very familiar with. And one, which is really quite interesting, is STEMpower.org with STEMpower Ethiopia, that now has 58 centers in East Africa on the way to 100. And their program actually attaches to existing schools. And the philanthropist that put that in, I was able to meet with for 3.5 hours. He lives just north of Boston when I was there a couple of weeks ago. Also, if you look at RoboGarden, if you look at Mage Networks for Internet Connections, particularly for Panama, because you have a lot of hills in there, right? Okay, try to put fiber going up a hill. Try to cut a fiber line and have it extended into a Wi-Fi network where you want it, and try to have it go to schools where you want it. Doesn't work. But any place you have a POP, you can put Mage Networks, attach it to the fiber line, and then you can then extend it with a Wi-Fi network. If you run a satellite network, and I think what's going to happen with Enrique is you run satellite networks for gaming, then what happens is someone's going to shoot somebody else faster because the internet latency is less with one shooter rather than another. So you're smiling there. So what I'm saying is the solutions already exist. I'd be happy to connect anybody that wants to do that. The RoboGarden's available in 5 languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, already in Brazil and working on Colombia, Mandarin already in China, and Arabic already in the Middle East. So the ability to build the capacity that you need already exists. You don't have to make it yourself. And there's other things that Enrique's doing that I'm still trying to figure out. We have to get caught up. That would help you go build your capacity, because he's got some global connections that are great. Otherwise, you'll be limited on even capacity running off the internet. You'll be limited on training, etc. So anyway, just a few tips for you and everybody else.
So something that Bob just said that I think triggered, there are very few regional institutions that really think regionally in Central America. IDB is supposed to, and Roberto, you mentioned IDB, but they still tend to fund things at the country level. They're almost worse than Central America's government. But I was wondering if you could put something together, and maybe even with GIMI, a truly regional ecosystem building project funded by IDB. IDB and the US have a strong vested interest in improving the economy of Central America and enabling startups to be successful there, as opposed to people wandering across the border. So I think that there'd be strong support, at least from the people I know at IDB, for this. It's hard because they tend to think in countries, but I think from what you're doing, you could make a very strong case about how difficult it is to accomplish this country by country, particularly in terms of startups and SMEs. And so I'm wondering if you've had any discussions with IDB, whether there's something we could help with to really supercharge that effort to really create a regional ecosystem with corporate backing to open up local markets and create more regional markets. I don't know, but there's got to be something there that would be tantalizing to IDB.
Ronald, I think we have discussions with IDB and did receive a little funding for IDB for a project last year. So we with IDB for a project last year, we were able to get I think it was around 500,000 for collaboration, and a lot of that money was used primarily for seed capital. So we put some of the money towards. But it was the first experience.
But that was for Panama,
very
right?
Panama based, yeah.
It's Panama.
Yeah,
I'm talking about something different. Yep.
We will be very glad to collaborate if you want to add your initiatives to this. It's not an easy project to put it together for IDV, but certainly something that we're looking at. And we have. I think in IDV also, not only do you have to find the project, you also have to find the right. They have many areas of IDV, so you have to find the area which correctly aligns with the initiative. But certainly IDV is a good source. We're also looking at we're looking at the standard Silicon Valley private sector based. So we're looking at the standard Silicon Valley private sector. Forget IDV. There's a lot of very wealthy individuals out there. We have to wait for IDV. We have a good case. And we think the answer to that is no. So we are also looking at IDB also is a complementary. So we have it in our roadmap. So if you could collaborate to that, it's fantastic. I want to also for a second go back to what Bob said. Bob, your idea on STEM. Two things. I wanted to let you know that some initiatives with the Panama Chamber of Technology. We were able to get Panama to be the host of the Global Robotics Olympics. So here in Panama, we're very proud that we're going to be the host of the Robotic Olympics in 2023. And by the way, we have a startup in our portfolio. Of course, Escala starts building portfolio companies. But we have a company called Panama STEM, which actually offers a cloud-based service to do after-school programs and then curricular programs on STEM for all the schools, and the government have funded some programs to actually run these STEM programs on robotics on all the high schools in Panama. So we're also this startup also is doing additional programs in countries like Salvador and Colombia and so forth. So it'll be interesting to maybe have a discussion later on the aspect on STEM and STEM capabilities on schools, and maybe also introduce you to this portfolio company that we have that is actually very focused on that part, which is STEM education and expanding the let's say the knowledge of STEM and the interest of STEM on kids from the early stage in schools. But one interesting aspect is we're having the Olympics, the Robotics Olympics in Panama in 2023. So we're very happy.
Thank you, Roberto, very much for answering to this question and great comments. There was one question from Julie, but I think you kind of answered to that, right? Could we hear more details about the innovation challenge you did with startups, and will this happen again? I feel like kind of answer to this. I don't know if you have any additional comment on that. And I'll prepare others if they have any question, just for you to know that we have here few, I would say, partners that are working on SMEs, right, in their countries. Enrique is trying to build a program with the government on SMEs. Juan, on the other hand, who is from El Salvador, and we are discussing with him as well to be a potential partner of GIMI, as we are doing with Roberto, might want to comment. And Salim, who is our partner in Northern Africa, is working a lot with SMEs. So please feel free to answer and share your best practices on that. Sorry, Roberto. Please.
Yeah, just a little bit on our program with startups last year. It was a pilot program on open innovation. So we partnered with the local Chamber of Technology here in Panama, which is called Capatec, and IDB. And then we essentially recruited 20 corporations to essentially give us innovation challenges. And we release the innovation challenges every 3 months. And essentially the innovation challenges were challenges in logistics, agriculture, and fintech. And then the corporations had to come up with creative ways. And we had a pool of around 180, let's say, innovative teams. Some of them were from universities, some of them were professionals, some of them were from the private sector. But essentially, we were able to pull 180 teams of startups or innovators. And then on the other side, we had 20 corporate that then the corporates will gave us throughout the program around 80 challenges that were distributed in 3 groups of presentations or calls. And then in each of those calls, we got proposals, and then the proposals were filtered by a panel of judges to see if they were interesting. And if they passed to the next stage, they were presented to the corporations as opportunities. And ultimately, we funded around 20 of those opportunities. And some of them actually became interesting companies. So we have, for instance, a startup that is doing blockchain certificate of origin and supply chain tracking using blockchain for a pharmaceutical company. It was kind of interesting. And then the other one is we were able to generate a corporation that is doing an Uber-like service for installations of like electricians and general work. It's like a TaskRabbit, for instance, if you see a US similar company, for instance, for TaskRabbit for Latam. So those among others, but we funded around 20. The other interesting thing with Scala is that we also participate actively in funding and taking a position in some of these companies, so that it's not at the end of the program, the company doesn't end up with we took a photograph and it's the end of the program. We continue to collaborate with these corporations throughout their lives. So we're sort of their partners. So not only doing a program, but also collaborating with them. So it's an interesting opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you, Roberto, very much. Any other question? Before
actually, from my side, Roberto, as you know, because we've been discussing this for a while, we're having some delays in Peru because of the political situation, but we've been working, with the government and also to establish, an ecosystem to empower, small and medium enterprise in our country. The project is really, we are just waiting for the final approval from the government, but that's something that eventually I would like to discuss with you, because I saw in your chart that Peru is not in your radar, at least for at the moment. And I believe Peru has a tremendous opportunities to be part of that particular ecosystem. So I would like to basically talk with you about that, how we can integrate also Peru within that chart.
Fabulous. That would be fantastic, Enrique. Let's do that as soon as possible, because you're right. We haven't had enough discussions for us to include it there, but I think Peru will also add to the equation, and we will have to do that discussion. Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous.
Yes, Ron? You are
You're
mute,
muted.
Ron. Please.
One other comment, just because we're in the middle of a GIMI sponsored leadership course for 2,000 entrepreneurs and emerging leaders in Brazil. We're doing 500 right now and 1,500 starting in another 1,500 in a couple weeks. But one of the big pieces of that has to do with connecting vision to projects through platforms. And one of the things that's come out and between platforms and projects, there's portfolios. And it would seem to me that if you were to assess, which it sounds to me like you've done, your situation, your platform is not strong enough right now to help you achieve your vision, because your vision has to be, it seems to me, to very much be focused on building not only a local ecosystem, but a regional ecosystem that enables people to tap into other connections in the region, other markets, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things that we've been doing with all these emerging leaders in Brazil is their portfolios, where there are projects that help them build the platform, strengthen the platform, those projects get priority. So you may want to look at projects, not so much from how they benefit you in Panama, but how do they help you build a much stronger platform that enables startups and SMEs to get to more of a regional market. And therefore, when you look at IDB or anything else, you'd be saying, how can I morph this project that's in my portfolio to make sure that it is in fact contributing to my strengthening of the platform, which is what the SMEs and startups need. They want a stronger ecosystem, a stronger platform that Escala can bring to them. Is that?
Yeah, Ronald, this is very interesting. Certainly an area for collaboration with GIMI we just discovered, but let me tell you what we are thinking of. There's a company in the US called Be On Deck. I don't know if you're familiar. Be On Deck essentially creates ecosystems of human capital so that they could tap them and pull them together into startups.
Yeah.
Our observation on a lot of these startups is that they are lacking some talent. We can have a startup which is fantastic, but it's lacking whatever, finance capability, or maybe a higher technology, or maybe knowledge on a particular area. One of the things that we are doing in Scala is we're pulling individual talents so that we could have them on deck for the purpose of pulling them into startup. So we call this the Scala Consulting Network. So it will be very interesting, for instance, if you have professionals in Brazil, and we're trying to do this with other professionals. Right now, we did a pilot very rapidly to locate professionals, but if we could somehow locate professionals that have certification also, so that we can then have them on deck to participate and pull talent into startups. Sometimes the startups not only need money, they need talent.
Yeah.
So if we could pair them together. So one of the other areas that we're looking to do is we are looking to syndicate the way we pull talent into the opportunities, meaning we don't have to have all that talent in Scala. We just have to have a way of finding the talent and putting it together into the right company. So your idea of these 1,500 certified innovators that we can somehow pull that talent or have some of that talent available for some of the startups so we can pair them, it'll be interesting. But by the way, there's a startup in the US doing that. It's called On Deck. Very interesting, and raised a lot of money recently to doing that in Silicon Valley. So the only question that we're asking ourselves is, could we do this in Latin America? Probably have a lot of talent and a lot of untapped need. So and then the other thing right now is I want to sort of end the conversation is COVID has changed everything.
Yes, I was
It
going to
doesn't
say.
matter if we're in Latam or we're in Silicon Valley.
Right.
What it matters is, can we pull talent together, and can we find opportunities or things, problems to solve that have a global impact. And I think there is a lot of opportunity, but certainly COVID leveled the playing field.
Yeah.
Because it's different now, but very much different. So I think there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, like all this training we're doing in Brazil is on Zoom. That would have never been true before.
Never been true.
So all of a sudden, distances and travel and time and all that goes out the window because people are more comfortable, both people in their 70s like me and people in their 20s. So they're all more comfortable, so you don't leave anybody behind by doing it on Zoom, and you can reach to the whole region, particularly the bilingual or Spanish-speaking region, very easily. So I think it is a brave new world post-COVID.
Ron, let's look into ways to collaborate on that, because I think it will be very interesting, especially if you have a pool of talent that you're certifying. If you somehow make available some of that talent to some of the startups that we're developing, that would be very interesting.
Most of their learning is peer-to-peer. They learn from each other in small groups, facilitated by a mentor. So I think you can build those small teams, part of larger teams and cohorts and everything else in Central America, certainly way well beyond Panama. And I think there'd be tremendous benefit to that cross-fertilization among startup personnel or people interested in startups or entrepreneurial things or innovative things or whatever.
Great.
Thank you very
Fantastic.
much, Ron and Roberto. Thank you very much for the great presentation. We got really interesting insights from you on what you are trying to build there in Panama, but mostly what you are trying to do in the whole region. And I think you have really, you might find here at the GIMI think tank really good partners that are operating in Latam, but even outside that might help you make this vision real. I'd like to stop the broadcasting and maybe go back to our informal meeting. So